We've had some really, I was in a very, very interesting discussion about leadership. So we're really well prepared for this session. I'd like to introduce our speaker, Pat Sullivan, who's the author of a book, you may want to write it down, called Attitude, the Cornerstone of Leadership. Attitude, the Cornerstone of Leadership. This is a guide to the principles of leadership. Pat's been a successful former teacher at both the high school and college level for over 40 years in the Chicagoland area. Pat's influenced thousands of leaders. In each of his 4 decades of coaching, he was named Coach of the Year, and he's now in, count them, 6 different halls of fame. Pat has spoken coaches clinics throughout the country and abroad. His message is that being a leader is about attitude. A good leader has specific characteristics, and attitude shapes effectiveness. And take it away, Pat.
Thank you, Clark. Thank you, Clark. And please excuse my sitting, some recent back problems. But as I look around the room, I quickly noticed that I'm not the smartest person here, maybe the dumbest. Now I say that, and you educators see if this resonates. Everything I know after 44 years in education, 10 at the high school level, 34 at the collegiate level, came from a radio show. If we've got some Chicago people here, the Wally Phillips Show. And this is all I know about education. Wally said, Mom came in to wake up Johnny one morning for school, hit him on the shoulder and said, Johnny, it's time to go to school. Well, Johnny rolled over and said, Mom, I'm not going to school this morning. And I'm not going for 3 reasons. I hate school. I hate all the kids there, and I really hate the teachers. Roll back over. Well, Mom hit him on the shoulder and said, Johnny, you are going to school this morning, and you're going for 2 reasons. Number 1, you are 45 years old. And number 2, you are the principal. So that about sums up my knowledge of education. First of all, let me really congratulate and compliment each and every one of you for being at this program. I think it's terrific that you took time out of your busy lives and came here. And Clark and Kristen, same thing. I certainly would like to congratulate them for founding this program. Because when you think about it, and after 44 years in sport, I can't think of anything that's more important than teaching character and values. And that's what you can take back from this program, and I think it's just a great weekend. Obviously, as Clark said, my charge is to talk a little bit about leadership. And to do so, I'd like to use that word that I think is the most important word that an athlete can take with himself or herself to the athletic arena. I think it's the most important word a student can bring with himself or herself to the academic arena. And for us as leaders, I think it's the most important word that we can bring on a daily basis to our leadership roles. Okay? I like to use the word, the word is attitude, obviously. I like to use it as an acronym. Give each letter of the word a characteristic that might make for a quality leader. And if you would, I'd just like you guys to do one thing. Just think about the characteristics. Because I think it makes no difference. If I'm presenting, you're presenting, makes no difference. If the presentation makes us think, then maybe it is of merit. Now, before I get to the acronym, 2 thoughts overall on leadership and see what you think, okay? The first comes from the patron saint of the university where I worked at, St. Francis of Assisi. I thought he wrote something that said everything we got to know about leadership. When he wrote, preach the gospel. If necessary, use words. Now, when you think about that, certainly the words of a leader are important, but I think of far more importance is who is that leader? What values does he or she stand for, and what example is set on a daily basis? Now, he wrote that in the 14th century. This century, we have a fellow named John Maxwell, who's kind of considered the guru of leadership literature. And he wrote a book, Everyone Communicates, but Few Connect. And in there, he did a survey on what do we believe? And it came out that we believe only 7% of what is said. So 93% of what I'm going to say, I'm in trouble, okay? However, we believe 38% on the way which it's said. But we still believe 57% of what we see. So from the 14th century to this century, for leaders, I don't think a thing has changed. It all gets down to our values and our example. Second thought, this is going to seem a little incongruous, but again, see what you think. The 75th anniversary of Forbes magazine dedicated the entire magazine to one concept. And I think it's the most important concept that each of you do on a daily basis. And the concept was decision making. So they went out and they interviewed leaders, education world, business world, political world, military world, asking them only one question about how they made decisions. At the time, I was, as an athletic chair, trying to lead about 350 student athletes and about 60-some coaches. So I was really interested to see what I could learn about decision-making from all that research. Came down to 3 words. How many in here have read From Good to Great? Yeah, quite a few of us, okay. Jim Collins, I think those of you who have read him, he really does a lot of research, does he not, with his books on business. Well, here's what he said. He said the best decisions made the last 25 years in American boardrooms, regardless of the business, all began with the leader saying the same 3 words. And this is going to surprise you. The 3 words were, I don't know. Now, I don't know about you. I've worked with leaders who knew. In fact, they knew everything. And it's a misnomer for me to say I worked with them, because nobody could work with them. They had all the answers. Then I work with leaders when tough situations came up. They call in the cabinet. They call in their principal people. And they weren't afraid to say, hey, I'm not quite certain where we go here. Let's really put our minds together and see if we can arrive at the best solution. And I found the leaders who weren't afraid to say, I'm not sure, I don't know, to be the strongest and the most secure leaders that I ever worked with. Now we'll go to the acronym, the A. The A stands for the word attitude. And I'd like to see your reaction to this. Here's the question I want to ask. Does one person's attitude make a difference? See, you'd be amazed when you go to different parts of the country and how people, because of the cynicism and the negativism, actually say no, one person's attitude doesn't make a difference. But here you see all kinds of heads nodding in the affirmative. To those who don't think it makes a difference, I would ask them these 2 quick questions. Think the attitude of Adolf Hitler made a difference. And I think it made a difference especially for the 6 million people of the Jewish faith who were asphyxiated during the Holocaust. 3 summers ago, I was doing some work in Austria because I had read some basketball stuff. Because I had read a lot about the Holocaust, I asked the coaches, are we near a concentration camp? And if we are, could you bring me there? Has anyone had that experience? Okay, a number of you. All right, I don't know about you, but it's the most eerie feeling that I've ever had in my life. And they gave us an instrument that looked like a transistor radio or a walkie-talkie, numbered 1 to 20. Each number corresponding to the room that you were currently in. And here's what I found. When you're in room 5 and you hit 5, they minced no words. They said exactly what had happened in that room. And when I left, I couldn't believe that anyone could think of those atrocities, let alone do them. Now, on the other side of the coin, London's being decimated with bombs. World War II. Winston Churchill's prime minister. He's asked to come to a class reunion. There's 2,500 people assembled in the room. And he said 4 words 3 times in the body of his speech. And those 4 words may have epitomized what England was about during World War II than all the volumes that were written. And some of you know what he said. Never, never give in. So I think the bottom line, one person's attitude does make a difference. But I think we have to have this disclaimer. It can make a difference this way and advance and enhance any organization, or it can make a difference this way and detract from, even destroy an organization. Like this poor guy. He went before the judge and his wife's attitude really made a difference. He had stolen a can of peaches. So the judge said, how many peaches were in that can? Guy says, 6, Your Honor. He said, all right, you got 6 nights in jail. In the back of the room, his wife raises her hand. She said, Your Honor, he also stole a can of peas. And the T. When Vince Lombardi was coaching the Green Bay Packers, he used to say this to the Packers: individual commitment to a group cause is what makes a team, a business, a church, or a country work. I had the unique pleasure of working from the East Coast to the West Coast with the great UCLA coach, the late John Wooden. Coach Wooden used to tell his UCLA players, the main ingredient of a star is the rest of the team. And then he would say, it's amazing how much we can get accomplished when nobody cares who gets the credit. Another guy a lot of you would know, I spent 15 summers with the former Marquette coach, the late El McGuire. El used to tell the Marquette guys, either we go uptown, either we all go uptown together, or nobody goes uptown at all. So obviously the first T is for what is the essence of athletics, teamwork. But don't you believe that teamwork transcends athletics? I think any endeavor that we get involved in, ultimately, if we're going to be successful, it gets back to teamwork. How many 7 Habits of Highly Effective People? Stephen Covey, business consultant, says when he goes into businesses in our country, he sees 3 kinds of people, or he did, okay? Independent people, dependent people, and interdependent people. And he says the businesses that are most successful develop interdependent people because we all need each other and no job is too small. I worked for a brilliant principal. He went on to become a bishop in our diocese, Bishop Roger Caffer. He had a sign on his desk. You may like this. I never saw it before, never saw it since. This was the way he led. None of us is smarter than all of us. Good friend sent me research done by the Fortune 500 companies. The research was on what criteria do you look for in hiring. The results were 13 criteria in order of importance, and things like problem solving, critical thinking, presenting. The number one thing those companies said they look for, teamwork. People who could come into their company and work as part of a team. Now maybe President Reagan had this figured out more than all of us, because he used to, one of his favorite stories was the 2 guys were backpacking in the mountains of Northern California, and he came upon the biggest bear they'd ever seen. And one guy looks at his buddy, and out of his backpack, he's taking out a pair of Nike running shoes. He says, do you think those shoes are going to enable you to outrun that bear? He says, no. But they will enable me to outrun you. No. You wouldn't necessarily want to be on that guy's team, okay? And even a pastor said this the other day. Even in church, we don't get it right sometimes. The pastor was talking about the evils of alcohol. And at the end, he finishes up and he says, so if I could take all the beer in the world, I'd throw it right in the river. All the wine, right in the river. And if I could get all the whiskey in the world, I'd throw it right in the river. Exhausted, he sat down The choir leader got up and said, please turn your hymnal to hymn 45, Shall We Gather at the River? So sometimes we don't get it all right. Second T, the great English essayist John Donne once wrote an essay, I know we got nobody in the room who does this, about people who complain. Nothing's ever right. Knee, back, weather, nothing's ever right. And I thought he aptly titled it The Screech Owls. Now the second T is the antithesis of people who complain. It stands for toughness or tough-mindedness. And I don't know about you, but the tough-minded people whom I've been privileged to work with, we all complain to some extent. But the tough-minded ones complain very little because they're too busy doing. Now, I always like this differentiation, again, see what you think, between a manager and a leader. A manager tries to do things right, but a leader tries to do the right things. And here's what I'd like to share with you on this part on toughness. If you're trying to do the right things as a leader, I would venture to say when you go back home, you have critics. Mine used to be lined up to Europe, okay? All right, 2 thoughts about critics. Number 1, you're in good company. You got critics, you're in good company. When Dr. King went down to Birmingham to confront the racism of that city, and its Sheriff Bull Connor organized a march, nonviolent march. But marches were illegal, so he was thrown in jail. While in jail, all his critics came out. The problem, Dr. King, is you. You're the agitator. So, and some of the criticism came from clergy, primarily white, but some black, okay? So Dr. King, I know a lot of you have read this, wrote his famous essay, Letter from the Birmingham Jail. And paraphrasing, here's how he began. I very seldom take the time to answer my critics, because if I took the time to answer my critics, that's all I'd have time for. How about right here at this university? Get ready, Clark. Well, years ago, our president brought before our cabinet, before we started the year at the university, an essay by Father Hesper. And the title of the essay was College Presidency, between a rock and a hard place. I think we could substitute leader between a rock and a hard place. And I've never forgotten this. He said that in his, I believe it was 26 years as president here, that he tried his best to do all that he could to make things better for faculty. And in that essay, he said in 26 years, he got 2 thank you notes. However, when he made decisions that faculty didn't like, he was inundated with criticism. So here's my second thought on critics. Don't worry about them. Don't spend a lot of time worrying about them. And the guy who had that down was the Irishman, because this was titled The Irishman's Philosophy. There's only 2 things to worry about. Either you're sick or you're well. If you're well, nothing to worry about. I think one of my guys here knows it. But if you're sick, you got 2 things to worry about. You're going to get better or you're going to die. Now, if you're going to get better, you got nothing to worry about. But if you're going to die, you got 2 things you got to worry about. You're going to heaven or you're going to hell. Now, if you're going to heaven, you got nothing to worry about. But if you're going to hell, you're going to be so darn busy shaking hands with all your friends, you ain't going to have time to worry. So much for that. Second point on toughness. Could you please think of the best teacher you ever had? I'm going to ask you 2 questions after this. Or the best coach. Not a good one, the best. So here's my first question. Was he or she easy? Not a hand. Was he or she tough and demanding? You betcha, okay? And because of that, is this not right? That teacher, that coach may have taken you to levels that even you didn't know you could reach. But there's another gift, and I'm going to see if somebody can yell out the second part of the title of the book. There's another gift. If that toughness made you a little tougher, then I think that teacher or that coach gave you a great gift. And that was best articulated in the Reverend Robert Schuller's book. Somebody finish the title for me. Tough times don't last, but tough people do. Okay? And finally, I got out of college right after the Civil War. So we were told in our educational classes, you had to be so tough. When you came into the classroom, see if anybody remembers this, we don't smile until Christmas, exactly. Well, I think it's okay to smile before Christmas, and I think the great leaders that I ever worked with, they were tough. That's why they got results. But they also brought joy and fun into the workplace. In the I. The I is for intelligence. Could this be an oxymoron? Of all people to talk about intelligence, a coach? Okay, we just throw the balls out. But the intelligent people in our society are the doctors, the lawyers, the accountants. 3 of my children majored in accounting. So I'd like to tell them about the 10 accountants who interviewed for a job. 10th one's got the job. Great interview. So they finish the interview, and the guy doing the interviewing says, all right, one last question. What's 7 times 3? 22. 3 weeks later, he gets a call. He's got the job. A month into the job, he goes into the boss and says, hey, I know I messed up the interview. Why did you guys hire me? And the boss leaned over and he said, well, you know, we interviewed 10 guys. And he said, yeah, I know you did. He says, well, of the 10, you were the closest. Now, we're all familiar with the ACT and the SAT, and I know I shouldn't say this on a college campus, but when you're my age, you can say what you believe, okay? I never believed in those exams, because I never thought, they're supposed to tell us if a kid has the intelligence to go to college. But I never believed in those things because I don't think they could measure what's in a kid's heart. How bad does somebody want something? But there's 2 characteristics that I feel I've seen in intelligent leaders. See what you think. Number 1, every intelligent leader that I've been around has developed the skill of listening. Take it in New York. We're at a clinic. High school coaches here, we're at dinner, sitting here. I'm sitting here. John Wooden is sitting here. For those of you who don't remember, his team's won 7 NCAAs in a row. The last 12 years he coached, they won 10. I don't think either of those marks are ever going to be accomplished again. If you were a fly on the wall at that dinner, and if you thought speaking was the key to intelligence, you would have thought that high school coach was John Wooden, and John Wooden, that high school coach. Because Coach Wooden, the high school coach, rather did most of the talking, and maybe the greatest ever, did most of the listening. Study of CEOs. How do you spend your time? 10% of the time, writing. 15% of the time, reading. 30% of the time, speaking. 45% of the time, listening. My daughter, I have 4 daughters and a son. My one daughter, Colleen, she's a hedge fund lawyer downtown in Chicago, okay? So she has to put together a lot of contracts, some millions of dollars. Every day when she opens up her computer, and I didn't know this, I'm so proud that she did it, she has one thing that greets her. And that thing was, I won't learn anything today by talking, but I will learn today by listening. And Will Rogers, I think, summed it up when he said, never pass up a good opportunity to shut up. And the second thing I think that I really have seen in great leaders, and you're doing this here, the core values of athletics, is perseverance to core values. How about Edison, right? 10,000 times he failed in experiments to find electricity. So when the guys came to him, his buddies said, why do you keep doing this? All you're meeting with failure. He says, because now I know 10,000 ways that it won't work. So I don't know what he would have got on the ACT, but he sure had perseverance. How about this one? I think this will surprise you. It did me. When they flunked him in 6th grade, the teacher wrote, "This student is dumb and hopeless." Winston Churchill, maybe the greatest leader of the 20th century. How about the guy, "What are you messing with drawing for? You got no talent to draw Walt Disney." Or what if we would have had them say to this other fella, "What are you doing messing with music? You're deaf." No Beethoven. Now those guys were geniuses. What about guys like me? Okay. How many of you saw the movie Rudy? There you go. All right. Rudy's a good buddy. We grew up in the same town, and in fact, I had made the first call to across the street to Holy Cross when Rudy was looking to get into the junior college. When Rudy, if he were here today, and I was just with him a couple months ago, he would tell you he graduated 3rd in his class, and that's the truth. 3rd from the bottom. Now, the movie didn't tell you he'd already flunked out of one college. I don't remember, I don't think it told us that he went to the Navy. But it did tell us when he was in that factory. That's when he walked around our city and he told people he was going to Notre Dame. Rudy was laughed at. Totally laughed at. Then at 5'9", 185, with Eric Parsegan coaching here, he's going to play football at Notre Dame. The laughter grew louder. Well, you know from the movie, he had perseverance to his core values, and he does the greatest thing I think of anybody in the country when he's going around telling young people. 2 things: don't give up on your dreams, and don't let anybody tell you you're dumb. And the 3rd T, there's a book, Study of Corporate America, called In Search of Excellence. And you know how the simple can sometimes become the profound. In there, the authors say this: one of the saddest things in corporate America, it could be for us as leaders, is that the leaders, the top officers in companies, VPs, presidents, CEOs, fail to come down to the people who are making the company work. Secretaries, people on the assembly line, truck drivers, and say to them the 3rd T, which you probably already figured out: thank you. Thank you for all you're doing to make our organization what it is. I'd like to take that to a little step further on thank you, and again, see if you think this has any merit. We're in the Ozarks. I'm with the children. We see a sign that says Abundant Memories. We're on vacation. Had no idea what the sign meant. We looked down into the valley, and there's like 6 or 7 cabins. So we said, hey, we got the time. Let's go just see what this is. Little did we know we were going to have the best history class that all of us had ever had. We met with the gentleman who had the beard down to here, the bib overalls. First thing he told us, he traveled 200,000 miles throughout our country, gathering artifacts. Each artifact for different parts in American history. And that's what the cabins were: Revolutionary War, Civil War, the Depression, etc. Okay? So he would take you to each cabin, use the artifacts to talk about the mores of the time. We got to the Civil War. I should have paid better attention in history. I guess the country was broke. We couldn't pay the soldiers. So we gave them land. President Lincoln gave them land. So then he took out a tool. He said, you see this tool? And he said, most people would say that this is primitive. Then he showed us all the things it could do. He said, I call it ingenious. I said all that for one reason. Here it is. He says, you know who built this country? He said it wasn't the big name politicians. And it wasn't the wealth of America. He said the nobodies built this country. Some of you may relate to this with your grandfathers. My dad was a nobody. He had a 6th grade education. And that was enough because he grew up in the Depression and he had to go to work. So he worked in factories all his life. Now, I worked 34 years in higher ed. A lot of PhDs. I've yet to meet the PhD who has the wisdom of my dad. who had the wisdom of Dad. Somebody yell it out, who's the nobodies in athletics? Where do they sit? On the bench, right? Al McGuire, the smartest, street smart guy I've ever been with. When they're in their 40s, I never worry about the guys on the bench. So a thought, see, you think has merit. He says, because when they're in their 40s, they're vice presidents and presidents of companies. Because they know how to roll up their sleeves and go to work and not get glory. But I worry about the stars. Because when they're in their 40s, nobody's carrying their bags and telling them how wonderful they are. So the final thought in your organization, consider thanking those who get little or no recognition. Consider thanking the nobodies. And the U, the letter stands for the word. The best definition, so U stands for you. The best definition that I ever heard of a teacher or a coach is a one-word definition. Facilitator. The great teachers and coaches, I think, facilitate. They make the learning easier. Now, if you could go back to your best teacher or your best coach, did he or she do these 4 things? Number 1, they knew their subject matter, be it algebra or football. Number 2, they were organized. They could disseminate their knowledge. Unlike maybe that brilliant professor, he knows the subject matter, but he can't get it down to us mortals. And I love this expression. I think this is better than teaching, okay? I love this expression from our profession, from the coaching profession. I haven't taught till you've learned. The third thing I think that the great teachers do, and leaders, they teach, coach, and lead with enthusiasm. But the most important thing, by far, that I think the great ones do is they care for the people in their charge way beyond the narrow confines of a classroom, a basketball court, or a place of work. And in our profession, and Clark, I think this really hits what you're doing this weekend. I thought this guy really, his life encompassed what you're doing this weekend. His name was Amos Alonzo Stagg, the head football coach at the University of Chicago when Chicago was in the Big Ten. Okay? His degree was from Yale. It was in divinity. He studied to be a reverend, but he felt he could better minister to America's youth from a football field than he could a pulpit. Okay? So now here's where the U comes in. So I don't care how good the teacher is. Who's the only one that can make you learn? You, right? And ain't we getting away from that? We're making excuse after excuse after excuse, when the bottom line, the only one responsible, I think, for your body of work is you. I know it's true in athletics. I've coached all conference players, I've coached all state players, I've coached all Americans, and I know this for a fact. I never made one of them a player. Never. Maybe I had a little thing that facilitated a little bit. What they did in the weight room, what they did in the off season, and what they did every day at practice, that's what made them a player. And the last thought on you, from Albert Einstein, says a lot about leaders. I can think of no other reason why we're here except to help others. And the D, Salt Lake City, Utah. Coach talks about a woman whose name I never heard before or since. Her name was Kay Vandermeer. On September 26th of 1959, she bowled a 300 game to win the National Women's Bowling Championship. That was in Minneapolis. She lived in North Dakota, where the coach lived. On the way home, her automobile was hit by a train. They didn't think she'd live. 6 months while in a coma, never opened her eyes. Full year, didn't walk. Had to learn how to walk again. And the irony of the story was, same date, September 26th, 1964, 5 years later, she bowled a 290 game to win the North Dakota Women's Championship, state championship. And for those of you who bowl, she did it with her left arm because her right arm had been amputated from the accident. The corollary to that story that I'm going to give you right now might be the most profound thing that I ever heard in my years in education. Here was the corollary. Your FQ is more important than your IQ. And your FQ is your failure quotient. How often can you fail and have the resiliency to get back up? Edison did. Okay? Churchill did. He was dumb and hopeless. How about this? That's really not said, but Rudy will tell you this. You know what he was told? Because there was no political correctness in our day. For 12 years of his education, he was too stupid to learn. Then he gets over here, and the brothers at Holy Cross do some testing. He finds out he has dyslexia. He couldn't have been more excited. Now he knew there was a reason why learning came so difficultly, okay? I think Lombardi summed up and Pat Riley summed up your FQ better than anybody. Lombardi said it this way. The glory in sport is not in never falling. It's in getting up after the fall. And Pat Riley says it this way. Success is getting up one more time than you've been knocked down. So the D is for determination. And I really believe, like this program that's done so well, okay, it had to have people like Kristen and Clark who were determined that it was going to do well. And I have no idea of the history, but I think most things that turn out well have had some failure along the way. 1 minute? Okay. God, I wanted to tell you a real good story, but I can't. All right? So we'll go with this. The E is for effort. I used to think effort was the key to being a good athlete, student, or leader. I don't believe that anymore. Here's what I found. Too many athletes give you good effort Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, but they can't reach down, find the same effort Thursday, Friday, Saturday. Not just semantics. It's not effort that makes for greatness. It's consistency of effort. The great ones consistently can find the best they got that day. And I also think, as a very last thought, some things can't be taught, but they can't be taught, they can be caught. Sandra Bullock, last Jay Leno show. Jay, I've been coming on your show for 20 years. I want to thank you for your graciousness. And she thought, hesitated, and I want to thank your staff for their graciousness. I don't know that Leno could have sat down and said to his staff, I want you to be gracious. Do number 1, number 2, number 3. Or you, as a leader with your effort, could say to your people, I want you to do the consistent effort, 1, 2. No, but I think they can catch it. And I'll finish with this last thought. I love this expression that when all is said and done, it's not what we gather, it's what we scatter. And if, as leaders, we scatter graciousness and kindness and toughness, then I think we'll really make a difference in the lives of the people we lead. Thank you.
Thanks so much for your words of wisdom, Pat.